welcome into another episode of That's the Truth. I am your host, J.Gallegos. I'm so happy and I'm delighted that you've decided to tune in with us, and I hope you've been following along. We've had tremendous guests so far, and we're just privileged and honored to be able to sit and have conversations that allow us to grow and to learn new things, and conversations that inspire us to continue reaching new levels, new potentials. And the entire idea of having these essential conversations are to give us the building blocks and to give us essential tools to be able to become what God has called us to be. And today I have a special guest, and just like all the guests that come on to the podcast, they're all special. They all have phenomenal wisdom. And by the way, if you haven't been following along, we've had tremendous guests like Joseph Perez. We've had Andrew Puentes here recently. We had Ron Smith. We've had Katie Flores. We've had Raised to Stay author Natalie Runyon, Pastor Ryan Franklin from POA, and the list goes on and on and on. And if you've missed any of those conversations, I want to invite you to go back and listen to that, and you're going to learn so many different things, phenomenal nuggets of wisdom. And we're blessed to be able to have access to amazing leaders, amazing thought leaders, amazing pastors, and different types of presence that influence us and allow us to be able to continue stretching our mind and continue getting closer to God in so many different ways, and practical takeaways, axioms, and maxims that we can apply to our life. So there's so much value there. Go back and tune into that. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do so. I'd love if you share it with someone if you feel that there's a word that they could also benefit from. And we want to provide value to every single episode. And then today is no exception, because today we have a dear friend, an amazing leader, and we have an amazing communicator, and just a tremendous heart for serving people and serving others. And we've learned so much from her. We've had the opportunity of getting to know each other over the last few years, being connected through Hyphen Ministry, which is young adults. For the ones that don't never heard of the phrase Hyphen, that's young adults 18 to 30 or so. And we've had it's been a tremendous blessing and a tremendous honor to be able to share time with Sister Mitzi Monday, and she's here with us today, and we're going to have an amazing conversation. And I'm just delighted that you're here, Sister Mitzi. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here once again.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been looking forward to having you, and we've been counting down the days. We've been preparing, and we've been just excited about it. So we're glad that we're here.
Same.
So there's a lot of thoughts that kind of went into my mind going into this conversation and going into today, and before we get into some of those topics, and I kind of want people to understand where you come from, what you're about, what you're involved in currently, and how we got here to today.
Yeah, well, of course, as you know, I'm originally a Florida girl, so I was born and raised in Florida, and we moved out to Houston in October of 2014, and so that's how I got here physically to Texas, was through a move to be closer to family. But as far as like the work and for the ministry aspect and what I'm involved in the church, I started at a young age, and really, I guess when I was younger, I loved worship. I loved singing, playing. And I really thought at that younger age that somehow that I would be involved in that, or at that level in the church. And I have been through the years, still am in my local church at Life Tabernacle under Brother Monday. I still lead the music there, work with the music department. But as the years progressed, there's so much to do in the kingdom that it was never like, okay, you're going to do music and that's it. And in some ways I struggled with that because I felt like there were other people that I saw in music ministry, my counterparts that really just went to different levels. And I felt like they outplayed me. They outsang me. Like they had so much they were dedicating just to that one ministry. And I love that. And we need that. We need those people that train, that pour into the Mitzi Mondays.
Right.
And I struggle with that. But then I also had to realize, okay, God, you did not split me different directions for no reason. And I found out that it wasn't just music that I was involved in. And at an early age, I just had a heart for people. And I saw that, played out in my home with my parents. And they both worked a lot with new converts. And often my dad, just because of his background, his understanding, and both my parents not getting into church until their early 20s, their view of people and understanding of people who were unchurched.
Right.
And so I just gained this love for my mom and dad, and seeing people around me and learning at a young age just to have a heart for people. That it was not about the ministry. You're like, okay, I do music, or, oh, I teach Sunday school, or, oh, I'm over this particular group, but that I'm in ministry. I love people. I care about people. And so through the years, it depended on, what was needed at that time. And so I found myself working with youth or young people, junior high age, that 12, 13, 14, where they're just getting into youth group. And then eventually, I think, when it comes to maybe a ministry within a department in the church, before there was hyphen or young adult ministries, you kind of went from being a young person to you were a single.
An adult.
Yeah, you either went to youth camp or you went to a singles conference. I mean, that was the dividing line there. And so that ministry didn't exist, but we desperately needed it.
Absolutely.
And so when I started getting involved in that, I realized that was where my passion was. Because I think it was an area in my own life where I struggled most.
Okay.
Was not as a teenager, but was when I had to launch into adulthood.
Right.
So that's kind of where I ended up today. And so, of course, as you said earlier, I still work with Hyphen in our local church there. And, of course, Life Tabernacle and also Tabernacle de Vida. We have 2 Spanish congregations and an English congregation. And so currently right now, along with the help of Jen and Jacob, who will one day assume this ministry over and take it over, working with me, we work across all 3 congregations. So we work the hyphen across that whole group. So that's kind of where I'm at today, along with whatever else needs getting done at church. And that's kind of how I ended up here.
I love that so much, your heart for just overall service, but more specifically for the young adults. And I love that because for the exact same reason that you said, and even when you were in that age, you said that you didn't have that middle ground. You went directly into adulthood. So even back when I was in my early to mid 20s, there was a lot of ground there that required some type of guidance, or especially with ministry, even outside, like with mentoring. Do I go to college? Do I follow a career? Do I go to Bible school? So there's a lot of questions within that age group. And then there were so many things that were in focus back then, and noticing the needs in that age group were not part of that focus. It was, well, you got baptized, you got filled with the Holy Ghost, look for ministry. It's like, okay, well, I want to do ministry. Yeah. And at the same time, well, I'm trying to figure out how to sustain myself because mom and dad, or mom or just dad, or, whatever the case that person had in their home. Now it's like, well, I need to help provide, or I need to help, bring in some type of income. So you're trying to figure that out. You're trying to figure out your future at the same time. Well, where are you going to be the next 10 years? You have that question. And it's like, well, what about now? You need to find ministry.
Yeah. It's a lot going on at one time. And I think what I found is that because there was no real focus, it's like I guess I was raised by a generation that didn't have that either.
Yeah.
And so if it's never changed, and that continues to propel, over time and through time, it's like we do what we saw. Unless we take that and then we're able to build on it with new information or come into our own. And so then I always felt like, well, whoever I talk to, if I talk to Jay's got one opinion because he feels like, well, what I did's the way to go.
Right.
You do this when you talk to somebody else. But I never felt like, people necessarily knew how to explain or help me find out who I was. Like, how do I take what I am and how do I fit into this ministry now?
Exactly.
And what if I bring something new to the table, or what if I think there are new ideas? Am I allowed to talk to that?
Yeah.
Am I invited to the table?
Right.
And so you always felt like, well, I'm just going to be that next choir member, or I'm going to be the next whatever, with not necessarily direction on how to get there, and how to build and find out how can God use what I have, and how do I, get myself prepared for that.
Yeah. That's so good. And that just brings so many thoughts to mind. And one of those being, I think we're used to in the earlier days, or at least in the times where maybe 15, 20 years back to now, I think we've been accustomed to expecting people to mold into ministry rather than observing the person, learning the person, and say, okay, what could you provide to make this better? And I've always been an advocate for not opening ministries for the sake of just opening one. You can't open up a prison ministry and you have no one that has any kind of experience or the feeling or the care, the heart for what that requires, or what that even looks like, much less what could they need. I'm not saying that can't be done anyway, but it's so much more special whenever you say, well, I came from a broken home and I know what it's like to see brothers and sisters, in and out of this situation. And I know how I could probably help them because I went through that and I still made it through. So all that to say that sometimes we expect ministry to adapt, or expect people to adapt to the ministry rather than saying, hey, like, you have a gift in this area. I think you would be amazing in this community. Let's start that because we don't have it and there's a need and you could help.
Well, and I think too, I recently had a conversation about this with someone, is that there's always the generation beyond us, and then our generation, wherever you're at in your life, whoever you are, doesn't matter your age, there's always one beyond you.
Yeah.
Your generation, there's always one behind you looking forward at you. And it can run both ways to where, every generation brings something new to the table.
Right.
And it can be for a lot of reasons. It can be advances in technologies, that we're seeing now, that boom of the electronic world, the social media, the constant flow of information. And that comes with it, certain knowledges, ways that can propel the church in different areas and give the church capabilities that it didn't have before. But if, I told my hyphen group this because it was a conversation I was having with them too. If we that are in that era before, that current era that has all that new stuff to offer, and I more spend my time in griping about, well, why don't they have this? Or, why don't they know this? Well, why don't we have this in the church? Or why aren't we taking advantage of this? And then if that generation before us is not willing to make way for us and say, oh, well, that's new, that's just going to thwart this, or that's, not willing to accept that and make room for those giftings, because some of those things are not their choosing. Like, you look at people that came through World War II, and they were adults during that era. And the children that came from those baby boomers, or the baby boomers were the children of that generation. Every generation is defined by something, depending on what was going on in the world, politically, financially, what were the booms in technology in that time, what came to being in that time, and it's what you relate back to. And in recent society, we started with baby boomers, but then there was, Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, it just keeps going. And there's got to be that willingness and that spirit within the church, is that if we're going to keep the church going and we're not going to be a one generation church, that generation that went before me has to make room for me and allow me to use my gift, and not be like, well, if she gets in the mix, well, then how often do I get to serve? Rather than saying, well, if I'm raising up them, hey, I get to take a vacation now. I get to breathe for a minute sometimes and not carry that whole load. or, maybe God at this season of my life, I'm at a different place than I was 15 years ago when I started playing or singing or whatever. And I have something new that God can lead me into, and then I have wisdom now to step into that. But if I keep holding on to that and say, this is me, this is who I am, I'm the teacher, I'm the music person. And so I think it goes both ways, and we've got to realize there are people coming behind us too. And are we going to give them a hand and make room for their gift and say, hey, we're all in this together. How can we help the church? Then you thwart that.
Yeah.
You don't get that, and then the church needs that, or you end up being a one generation church.
Yeah. That's so good. And even for people that are unchurched, somebody that may be listening to this and they came across this platform or they hear this conversation, this is still applicable to their life. This is still applicable because you can transfer everything that we're talking about here into the professional workforce. You can transfer this into daily life, and this is why I love talking to people, because everything that we talk about is not only applicable to what you see on the platform or what you see in a church setting or ministry, and you can literally take, and that's where we equip, right? Yes. In those conversations, we equip, helping others. So thank you so much for that. Like that's already blessed my life, and we're not even, just a few minutes into the conversation. So you mentioned focus just a minute ago, and the lack of. There's so many needs, and when you're lacking a focus in a specific need, then there's a vacant hole. Yeah. And when you have a vacant hole and you have an open door for focus or defocus rather, then I think you have a possibility for distractions to set in. Yeah. You're out of focus, not noticing the needs, where the needs are, where you could be serving best, then it's easily to get distracted. So what has been maybe some of the distractions that you've noticed that we deal with now today? It can be anything. It can be, what have you seen in distractions, or where have you seen that we've been disconnected? And that can be practically, spiritually. And how can we mitigate those?
I see it everywhere. And to your point, we don't just exist inside of the church. We exist in jobs. Right. I have a corporate job outside of my church life and everything that I serve and do there. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen, and I had a conversation with Jen about this just last night, because we just came through a whole series on distractions in different areas of our life. And they were focused on, attitude, faith, purpose, relationships. And it was split into like 5 different series or sets of focus. And how that, for one, I think in the spiritual world, it's a trick of the enemy. Right. And distraction has been used for forever, since the beginning of time. Yeah. In warfare, you distract them, and then you come in another way. The decoy. Yeah. That was like, right. That was the birth of distraction, I think.
You're right.
Is that, okay, we're going to come in with this small group, and we're going to get them so focused that we're coming in from over here. Meanwhile, we're going to come in from over there.
Right.
And so you see magicians use it. They distract us with our eyes, with the
quick hand.
And so that we're focused on something else, while they're able to deceive us and make us think we're seeing magic.
Yes.
But we're not.
Yes.
Okay. And so to me, the way distractions work, and when I was talking to Jen last night, I told her, I said, you know what? I said, when I was younger, and I think, Jay, the flow of information and the constant, it distracts all of us. If we act like we're not, and we've never fallen prey to it, we're not being honest. Because I like to feel like I'm a very disciplined person. I'm very focused. I'm a planner. I'm very organized. That's just my nature, my makeup. But I get distracted, and it's just this constant flow. And when, and I'm going to date myself here, but when I was younger, there wasn't this constant flow of information. My parents always got the paper, and it came at a certain time in the morning, and you found out what happened yesterday. And if it was like across the world, you might be finding out what happened the day before yesterday,
Oh, wow.
you know,
Yeah.
and then you had the nightly news come on. You couldn't like click on your phone at, just randomly at work and say, there's a shooting going on.
Real time.
There's this happening.
Real time.
And so, and even like the flow of ideas, I love decorating. I love being creative. And there was a time where you had to wait for maybe a good book to come out, or certain magazines would come out but now it's like I can just start, and it's that distraction. And sometimes even it's distraction, and it's also avoidance, because, I've got so much going on, or I'm overwhelmed. And we live in a world where we have more technology than ever before to make our life easier.
Yeah.
We can cook our family dinner in the Instapot in 20 minutes instead of taking, an hour and something for that meat to roast in the oven. Everything is quick, and yet we live in a constant overwhelmed state.
Yeah.
And I have found myself, it's almost like it's a soothing thing to say, let me just see what's going on out here. Let me just flip through Pinterest and see what kind of ideas are coming up for the projects that I want to work on.
Yeah.
And it becomes an escape. It's almost like it's a gateway drug. It's like, let me, and we think of escape as being, people deal with money, they deal with drugs, they deal with alcohol, they have ways of avoidance, but we also do it in ways that they feel like they're positive.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going through here and look what I'm finding. Let me pin that. Let me save that. And I've even found myself like I'm like, am I an Athenian or what? Like in the Bible, Paul's like, they're always trying to find some new thing, some new piece of information. And I find myself just gathering stuff that I know there's no physical way I can ever respond to or keep up with all of that. And I think it keeps me away from the true work and the focus that my heart should have for me to be successful in ministry.
Yeah.
I'm chasing tools. I'm chasing the next new idea. I'm trying to be, and there's nothing that's wrong with that in and of itself, in trying to stay current and help your group and be all that you can be. But if there's not the heart behind that says, this is what comes first, and this is what's important,
right,
then the enemy will use that for me just to stay distracted. I see it in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Like what is our goal? What is our focus? So why are we over here quibbling about this?
Right.
And in the corporate world, as you know, it all comes down to the dollar. I had this conversation yesterday at work.
Yep.
We have a tool that's so frustrating to me. It's one we're required to have. If the government comes in and says you do not have that right, we can get called on it. We can get dinged on it. We can get fined for it.
Yeah.
But less than 1% of the population of not just the customers I serve, the plans I work with, but our entire corporation, less than 1% of them utilize this tool.
Okay.
And so in the corporate world, we get that. Like, this is not the best in the world, but we're going to make it work. Why would we invest all of our money here and it's not meaningful to our member? It's not meaningful to our customer. Well, we can do that the same in our personal life and in the church and in ministry. Is I look at things that don't matter and I give them priority, and I put things that don't matter at the mercy of things that do matter.
Right.
Or put the things that matter at the mercy of things that don't matter. I misquoted that. So it's that constant saying, I have to keep myself engaged here.
Yeah.
I can't, I have to not walk down that path of distraction and it's many things. It's technology. It's just the whole thing, like we talked about, of getting sidetracked, avoiding things. I don't want to do this right now, but this feels good.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm getting something done here, and I'm really not. And a lot of times I'm just exposing myself to so much stuff that I don't need to.
You're right.
Through
Absolutely.
that distraction. So.
Exactly. So you said so many great things there, and I love that. And going to one of the things that you mentioned were the distractions and how they open us up to deceptions. And you're exactly right. It goes all the way back to the beginning of time, to the beginning of creation, Adam and Eve. And then what was her distraction then? Maybe we could probably argue the fact that, did she notice the tree before? Maybe she got close to it. We don't know exactly. All we know is that the serpent, the enemy, the devil came in, planted a question that made her think twice of what did God actually say. So then deception comes in, and then there you go, and then you have the birth to sin and disobedience. So many distractions around us, so many things that disconnect us from the main thing that we're supposed to be doing. And then nowadays, we have so many things that demand our mind. And I think it was before COVID, a few years ago. I can't believe it's already been almost 4 years now, right? So like around COVID time in the beginning, before we shut down, I want to say that was the last message that I shared with the church. How our mind is in high demand. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was explaining was the fact, it was exactly that. You mentioned creativity, was that distractions will encompass our mind and entrap our creativity. Yeah. So if you've been gifted with a high level of creativity, then distractions, of course, are going to be a tool that the enemy is going to use to deceive us and pull us away from that. Like, make you believe, no, you don't need that. You need to be searching for this. Yes. And then it's still one of those things where you're chasing a carrot that constantly keeps moving.
And it keeps changing.
Mm-hmm. So they tell you, or the world in essence, in general, chase the high dollar, chase the platform, chase the lights, the camera, chase the fame, chase the popularity. And you're constantly searching and searching and searching, never really finding it, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And for so many reasons, voids, vacancies, experiences, traumas, we supplement these things, escape to these things, rather than really focusing, okay, this is ground zero. What does God want from my life?
Yeah.
So those distractions often open us up to deceptions. And how critical is that?
I mean, obviously we know it's critical, but if you think about it, I think because distractions people look at distractions and it's like, okay, it has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Because we know, yes, the distraction is pulling us from what our purpose should be.
Right.
But what about when something's good?
Yeah.
Somebody stops by. I mean, our life is going to be filled with distractions that we have to manage. Mm-hmm. And sometimes because it's a positive experience, mentally, we do not register it as this is a distraction. This should not be in my life. We don't think about the fact, if we're not disciplined and intentional, then you're never going to notice that.
Yeah.
And so you stay in deception because if you don't have a plan, then there's nothing to follow. So if I have not said, this is how I'm going to be intentional in this way, this is the path I'm going to follow, then how do you know you're off of it?
That's great.
If you're just on a joyride and you're out riding, you're not lost.
Yeah.
You're not late for where you're going because you're not going anywhere.
Right.
You're just out enjoying the scenery. We don't have anywhere to be. If we come across a cool restaurant, we're going to stop and eat. If there's boiled peanuts on the side of the road, if there's a cool snow cone stand, we're just, okay, that's cool when you're joyriding or you're road tripping, but you can't do that in life.
Yeah.
And I think young people today, and it worries me. It's something that just grieves me because I feel like deception comes, Jay, when we lack knowledge.
Okay.
If I have knowledge, you can't deceive me.
Right.
If I know that something is poison and I have a history with that, I have knowledge about it, I've read up on it, I know the science behind it, I know I can't eat that. I know it's not, I know if I eat it, it'll kill me or it's going to make me deathly ill. If you try to come and tell me, Mitzi, eat that, or that's not poison. Who told you that? Go ahead, girl. You're good.
Yes.
You're not going to be able to deceive me. You can't because I know for myself. I know that I've studied it. I know I've had experience with it. I am not supposed to touch that.
Yeah.
It'll hurt me. It'll harm me. And I think we run into the same thing in the spiritual, because we have a generation that they lack wisdom and they lack knowledge. And I'm not spreading a blanket there, because there's many, many young adults and young people that do desire. But because we do live in an age of so much distraction because of our society, we're very highly evolved. We've got more tools and technology and things that are beaming across the world at warp speed. And there's something constantly, like I said, we were talking about earlier, that overwhelms me. Even though my life should be easy and simple, we should be living the best lives we've ever lived,
Right.
but yet we don't. And we struggle with more mental illness and mental health and anxiety and being overwhelmed because we're jumping and we don't have like that solid plan. But if I'm grounded, and that's not easy to be, to have knowledge and to have wisdom, that's something that the Bible says you have to buy it and sell it not.
Right.
In other words, it costs you something.
Exactly.
It costs me time. It costs me saying, I will set aside this time to fill my heart with the right things that are going to prepare me for life.
Right.
And it breaks my heart because, Jay, I sit around a table every week with young adults that I can tell I'm bringing stuff from the Bible that I feel like they ought to know, and I can tell they don't know it, and they're hesitating and they can't answer me on it.
Right, right.
And I'm never going to shame them. I'm never going to say, well, you should know this, because that's not what I'm there for.
Right.
I'm there to guide and to encourage them and try to instill that love in them. But I had parents who pushed that and poured into me the importance of having knowledge and knowing God for myself and knowing the truth of God's word. And when you have knowledge, everything, anybody that comes in front of you or to you with something, whether it's the enemy, whether it's another voice, and there are voices out there.
Wow.
I mean, think about it. You're a solid platform that's pushing out truth and objectivity and such good things to a population that needs it desperately. But Jay, you're one of how many thousands, tens of thousands
Right.
of voices and platforms and podcasts. And if there's so much that comes across that if I'm not able to challenge what I hear with what I know to be true, I'm in trouble. And I'm open up for deception because I don't know the word of God for myself. And being raised in the church and going to Sunday school and hearing a sermon every week does not save you. It does not ground you in wisdom.
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
You have to apply it to your heart, and that only happens with a steady diet of it.
Right.
We all know I'm going to start becoming weak if I eat vegetables one meal a week.
Right.
That's not going to sustain me. Well, neither is hearing one message or one sermon that we can even only retain 10% of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Like we have to have something. And I think we have a generation that's very open to deception because they live in this world of 40-word responses.
Okay.
I cannot
Sound
build
bites.
wisdom and knowledge in my life to build a foundation on that's coming to me in 40-word bits.
Wow.
And it sounds good and it sounds cool, but it doesn't always line up to the word of God. One half of it does, the other half doesn't. And so, there's a lot of good voices out there that maybe don't even believe the apostolic doctrine that we believe.
Right.
And they're bringing forth good stuff. But what about the stuff that's not right or the stuff that's not grounded in truth? But because I don't have anything to compare it back to, I'm missing that comparison factor because I have not prepared myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where I think young adults struggle is because all of a sudden, nobody's telling you, Jay, you got school tomorrow. You got tests, you got exams tomorrow. You need to go to bed. Nope, all that gets cut off.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I'm an adult. I have to get my own self up for work. I have to make sure I make that college class. Nobody's making me go. And so I'm having to make decisions on my own.
Right.
And if I have not set that foundation in my life, or I'm not making sure I'm setting it in my young adulthood and saying, hey, whoa, I'm missing some things here. I better fill those gaps, and I better fill them with the right things.
Right.
So
That is so good. So you're telling me that with the lack of knowledge and wisdom, it is necessary to have truth to be able to compare. And the best way to combat distractions and deceptions is with the truth.
yeah.
Yeah.
And being disciplined to say, and I think it's having that plan too. And like sometimes if you're like a planner or organizer, they're like, oh, just live your life, just do whatever. And that's a personality thing. I mean, everybody, but there has got to be that sense, even if you're not an organized Excel spreadsheet, checking off all the checklist person, you still have to have a plan of where you're going. And I talk to my young adults about this a lot. I said, because when we were talking about distractions, I said, if you don't do what you know to do and you allow others to be a distraction in your life, I said, they're the worse for it.
Yeah.
Come on, Jay, let's hang out. Let's go do something.
Right.
You're like, no, I got finals tomorrow. Come on. You know you're ready. Come on. Just let's go grab a pizza with us. Let's go do coffee. And it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're going to go home and crash, do whatever they've got to do. Meanwhile, you have the finals tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so if you allow everyone else to dictate your world, instead of you saying, if I'm going to be successful, that's part of being an adult.
Yeah.
Is saying, if I'm going to be successful, then I have to set those priorities in my life and not allow people and things. And every good thing is not good for us.
Right.
Even
Absolutely.
like I talk to my group a lot about this because I've had this happen in my life personally where I had too much on me, and it seemed like a good, well, how could it not be a good thing? Helping a department at church or taking on something else. But if it depletes what you can do and your ability to serve what you've committed to, then it's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. You have to know when to say no. And you have to have that discipline in your life that says, if I'm going to accomplish and be my best self and what I was meant to be, I can't allow other people to dictate my schedule.
Right.
And to dictate my progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the example that you gave about a person that is preparing themselves for their exams, sounds like a person that is in college or getting ready to graduate at some point. That would be a season of preparation.
Yeah.
They're preparing for their career. And there's different seasons of preparations. There's preparation in ministry. There's preparation for school, careers, preparation. There's different phases, different seasons in life that we have to face and we have to push through. So I believe that in that season of preparation, it becomes critical to stay focused. And then that's when those distractions those distractions have the most value when you're in the season of preparation.
Yes.
So like what could be something that we can tell people that can help them stay on focus in that season of preparation to where it doesn't spoil it for you and you can actually develop exactly what God's called you to be?
I think it's important. And if there was anything, I guess if there was any one part of all of this and some of the things that you and I had talked about previously that would be our focus for today, it would be this thing, because I feel this edginess in young people and young adults. And it's like the moment, whatever we feel is the next thing becomes our focus. And it can't. Like, you have to know, okay, I have to have planning and purpose to say, okay, if this is what I'm planning to do, if I need to graduate and I want to be at this point in my schooling at this point, there has to be conscious effort. And I'm not talking about those type of things. But when that end game becomes your focus, then you lose track and you're distracted in your present. Well, every season of our life, literally every season, is the prep and the work. It's the trying ground for where we're going next.
Exactly.
And I'm talking about starting with an infant, with a child. Like you're teaching them all this dexterity stuff when they're 2 and 3 years old, how to make eye-hand contact, how to hold small objects. Because in a couple of years, then I've got to hold a pencil and learn to write my words.
Exactly.
And, we don't take a kid into first grade and start teaching them, geometry or algebra 2. No, we start them with 1 + 1 because all of those little small math functions are going to grow into bigger things as they get. And if we skip that, if we skip that preparing, that season of preparation, then they're not ready for the next season.
Right.
And it can be a crash and burn thing because I was so focused. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I want to give you this example.
No, please do.
When I was going to lay my head down on the pillow last night, and I was thinking about this very thought process. And what came to mind was when Absalom was killed in the Bible.
Okay.
And Ahimaaz comes to Joab and he's like, let me go and take tidings to the king. I want to take tidings to the king.
Okay.
And Joab said, in his wisdom, he's one of the king's mighty men. And he's like, no, today is not the day. Because of course he was talking about good tidings. I want to go give the king a word. I want to go give the king a good word. And he's like, no, today's not the day for it. He's lost his son. This is not the time. And so Joab turns to Cushai and he's like, I want you to go and tell the king what you have seen.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
So Cushai goes, okay, he goes, he's got his orders from Joab and he begins to go toward David. Well, then Ahimaaz, he's like, Joab, I want to run. I want to run. Let me run.
Yeah.
And Joab even told him, he's like, Ahimaaz, you don't have a message.
Okay.
You don't have a word to give to the king.
Wow.
He said, but I want to run. I want to run. And so Joab goes, well, run, boy. Run. If that's what you want to do, run. It's basically what he told Ahimaaz. So, of course, the king and his, the person on the lookout for him, he's like, right. I see a guy coming. I see somebody running. And he said, well, that's somebody's running. That's got to be, it's just one person. It's got to be good tidings.
Okay.
He's like, well, I see somebody else that's running over here too.
Right.
So Ahimaaz gets there before Cushai does.
He does.
But he doesn't have the word for the king. He just basically tells him, hey, king, all is well. Everything is great. God has, stomped your enemies out. And he goes, well, but what's going on with Absalom? How's Absalom?
Right.
And he's like, well, king, there was a scuffle. Things were going on. And I didn't see what happened. And so here comes Cushai. He doesn't, Ahimaaz beats him there. And then Cushai says, king, may, he asked about Absalom. He said, may all of your enemies be as Absalom is. He didn't have good news for him. But he knew Absalom was dead. He knew what had happened because he was an observer. He had been there. He was ready to speak to the king. He was at a point to give that message to the king.
Right.
But Ahimaaz wasn't because he didn't see it. And so in my mind, it's like I took this straight to this.
Yeah.
He wasn't prepared. He could run faster. And sometimes we do that. We get in that comparison game. Well, why do they choose Jay? I'm a better speaker than Jay. Jay's never been invited to this. He's never done this before.
And there's a lot of them better than me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I could say all the people say, well, why him? Why them? What? And you're like, well, it's like, wow, they chose them. And we can, and we talked about that, in our last Q&A session that we did for the Enlace conference, is that we become disillusioned because that becomes a pass or fail with us.
Right.
Rather than saying, this is not my season, or that's not what God has prepared for me.
Yeah.
That's not where I'm supposed to minister. But I run faster than Jay. I beat Jay there. I'm already here and he's not.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the word. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared.
That part.
And I think that's where young adults get hung up, is that disillusionment. They're spending a lot of time in distraction. They're getting things done in between there so they feel like they're being productive. But when that moment comes where life really hits them and they really have to come through, they're not prepared.
Yeah, that's it.
They're not prepared.
You're so right.
They're not prepared for it.
We like preparation.
And so, they have to realize, like, I'm not trying to get to any one given place, but I want God to use this season in my life how he sees fit. Instead of going to God and saying, God, this is how I want to be used. God, I want to be there.
Jeez.
I want to get asked. God, I want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
When being a part of that could lead us down a road of deception.
Right.
I've seen young people get caught up too soon. They're too young. They're not emotionally mature to take on leadership role, and they are used and used over and over again. And they begin to float and gauge themselves on the level that they're being used. But meanwhile, they're not gaining the knowledge or the depth that they need to work with sometimes what I like to call the underbelly of ministry.
Okay.
Where you're dealing with struggle, you're dealing with people, you're seeing the bad side of people. But if you're young and immature and you never, it's got to be, I've got to be able to do more than speak. Right. I've got to be able to do more than play. I've got to be able to do more than sing. I've got to be able to do more than whatever it is that gifting that I have. I have to have wisdom and knowledge and that trying ground to undergird that.
Right.
Undergird that gift.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, then I am out there and I'm not emotionally prepared, and I'm not mature enough to deal with all of the other stuff that comes with ministry.
You're so right. And that's amazing. And man, you're saying this is gold. This is gold. I love this already, because if anybody's listening to this, and I know that a lot of people are going to be sharing this, they need to bring a notepad, because and they need to go back this last 10, 15 minutes that you took the time to break that down. They need to listen to that in one time speed, because that is just gold. And there's going to be so much value there for a lot of people. So I remember growing up, being younger, and even until now I can cherish a season of preparation.
Yes.
And earlier on, with less discipline, less maturity, less experience, and less of all of those things, I didn't understand that I didn't have what it took to sustain a level of growth.
Same. And I'm speaking from experience here.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
Not like, I remember, that's why I was saying, working with this age group, I remember it being my biggest time of struggle.
Yeah.
Not always feeling like there was somebody to guide me through that part that I didn't know. And I learned it and got very hurt by it.
Right.
Because I wasn't protected from the crazy side of things, and like, nobody said you're going to deal with this, or we go about this slowly. And I'm talking about, I went into ministry and dealing with people like 14 years old, and had things that were expected of me, and you're not, and like you said, I wasn't prepared. Like, I can only now look back and really understand through growing and maturing just in the natural and in also in the spiritual, that's what that was, and how important that time was for planning and for me to learn what I needed to be in that next season, or for God to elevate me to being over different things, or having more people that I had influence over. He couldn't do that until I was ready, or I was going to crash and burn. I was going to get hurt, and I often did, because of the environment that I was in.
Yeah,
and you can then in turn hurt other people, which is not your intention if you're in ministry.
Yeah.
You get hurt, and you tend to hurt other people as well.
And that makes me think of the relationship of Elijah and Elisha, and how he's working out, and Elisha's out plowing the ground, his father's field, and he comes over and he puts a mantle over him. And, we know the story. He burns everything, decides to follow him. And then you hear nothing from Elisha again. You hear nothing. So at some point, whenever they were out with a group of prophets, he's serving the water. And you get a glimpse of what he's doing in the background.
Yeah.
You don't hear from him for a long time, and we don't know exactly how much time goes by. And then all of a sudden, here's Elisha serving water.
Because how do you go from nothing, Jay, to having a double portion of what Elijah had.
And then a double portion. And then splitting the waters. So he was serving the water before he was splitting waters.
Exactly.
Doing miraculous things, being used by God.
That's good. That is good. Now that's gold. That's gold there.
So the season of preparation, I don't want anybody to undermine that. And it's easy to sit and think, I need to be there. It should be me.
Yeah.
And that's a character issue.
Yeah.
And then that can be worked on. That's a character issue. And sometimes God, and I love his sovereignty. I love his sovereignty because God knows exactly what we can hold, what we can sustain, and what we're going to lose. So he doesn't want us to be in a platform or in a room with people and look like fools, and doesn't want to give us a platform that our character is going to cut us out of.
Yes, yes.
And it that's why it's so critical. And now I can look back and cherish the season of preparation. So that is one of those tools that I want people to really understand. Do not be distracted in that season of preparation. And so
embrace it too.
Embrace it. Exactly.
Embrace it, because you like now I wish like, and well, I guess people that are maybe not in corporate America, like, I know you work in a corporate setting as well. In my earlier years, in jobs that were not as complex as what I'm in now in a management position, there was tons of training.
Yeah.
Like I would go through 3 months of training, and you had system stuff to learn the system and all that. Well, after those first several years, and I started going into other type of roles, there was no training. I had to go in and talk to the person next to me and all of these things, because they're like, you're at a level of maturity and your resume has been built to a point, and you know all of this stuff, that we expect you jumping into this role, that I don't need to train you for 3 months or show you a system. You have the ability to forge that knowledge, or talk to people or whatever. And so I found out later in my life, as you get faced with where that sometimes those prepping grounds speed up. I'm like, oh, I wish I had that time when I was younger, where I had like unlimited time or more time to really focus to prep.
So you tell me that was important. That was critical then.
Yes, yes. And now I wish, and of course God, like you said, God is sovereign and he knows like, all right, Mitzi, you've been through a lot of trying grounds, and this one is building on other grounds that you already walked through. And so I've given you a space for this new and that part that's going to stretch you. And I've got to keep pulling back on the mercy and the wisdom and of all of my life. But if I don't start young and realize how important this moment is, that I'm not going to just draw on it to get prepped for that college graduation or for that job that follows that. 10 years down the road, I may draw back from this and say, wow, I learned that lesson then. And I'm going to keep drawing from that. So everything that we step through in our life becomes a part of our story, a part of our history that doesn't go away. And that was what was so important about Jewish history, and is that they put in the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Everything.
The battle they won, the battle they lost, the kings that committed adultery, everything that happened, it was written and it was recorded so that they remembered what happened in the past.
Nothing was blurred.
Nothing was blurred. And so we have that story that we draw back on. And so my mistakes are just as important in my future success as the things that I aced and that I came through with flying colors. Sometimes the mistakes are more important, because those mistakes are things where it was something in my character that needed to be worked on, or it was a maturity level that I needed to obtain. And so if I ever see myself sinking back, I've got to correct my course.
There you go.
And so we can't like, and I think that's where social platforms really, really hang us up, is we're wanting to present the best Mitzi. I don't want to be out there and I look busted, or I'm looking homeless today. Don't put that picture out there. You want to present the good that's going on in your life, the filtered version. but that's not the version that I live. And sometimes in my deepest moments, it's the worst times in my life that I go back to for faith that, okay, well, God brought me through that, or God taught me something through that, and it helps me through this time that I'm going on. So I refer more to the rough times in my life than I do to my successes.
That's good. That's good. One of the quotes that that really come to mind right when you're saying that is, I believe, it's by Craig Rochelle, and he often teaches and says he's big on leadership. So I love that because he shares a quote, and he says that people will admire your accomplishments, but they'll be inspired by your weaknesses.
Yes.
So learning to be vulnerable, there's value in being vulnerable, and there's value in vulnerability in general, and then saying like, I didn't just get here. I didn't just arrive like this. Like I didn't get here like this. I went through that season of preparation. I was disciplined through that season of preparation, getting up, falling down, getting up, falling down, and allowing myself to stay on the altar, if we can phrase it that way.
Yeah.
To continue letting God cut me. Continue letting God cut my character, cut me on the rough edges, and mold into what you see now.
Yeah. And it lets people know that you're mentoring or leading, that there is life after mistakes.
Yes. Yes,
There's
absolutely.
life after failure, and that those have to come just as much as the good stuff has to come. And that's how the rough edges are worked out in our life.
Yeah.
Like if I never attempt anything, if I never attempt the stuff that I find hard and that I find stretch me or that are out of my comfort zone, of course I'm going to make a mistake if I've never done it before.
Yeah.
My first devotion, my first message, the first time I attempt to do something is not going to be great or grand or pretty or something that I want, want my mom to see or that I want posted on, Instagram. But that's how I go from there to get to a place of growth, is I have to be willing to start somewhere, and I have to be willing to make mistakes.
Yeah. That comfortableness, or that comfort place with vulnerability, and just being friends with that space of vulnerability, I think that's what really reaches people.
Yes.
And it's very easy for the unchurched people, which is our goal, to reach and with the truth and the gospel. And it's very easy to present ourselves in a way that is unapproachable for unchurched people.
Yeah.
And here you are having to face a lot of deficiencies, a lot of issues, a lot of brokenness, a lot of so many problems that needs God divine touch in their life. And if we present ourselves in a way that is unapproachable, then we're not doing the gospel justice.
Yeah.
And we're not being vessels to allow God to pour us out everything that we've been pouring in preparation, and on Sundays coming to church, all the equipping, then where's it going?
Yeah. And I think it's about, it's showing through in our walk with God, honesty and integrity, not perfection.
Right.
It's being honest Christianity that says I'm not perfect, but I just want to please God. And I think, and we were talking, earlier about people learning from our mistakes or vulnerabilities or things that we've gotten wrong. I think sometimes people's biggest problem with church and with Christianity and people that call themselves a Christian or that are churched or whatever is that sometimes we say one thing and we do another, and we're not honest about that. We don't show integrity when we failed. And I remember a couple of circumstances. There was two different things. One of them, I had done something, had read something incorrectly on some paperwork, and we had this big mailing to one of our custom groups at work, and it went out wrong. And so I sent an email, and I copied my manager, and I copied the person who repped for that group. And I said, listen, there's been a mistake in this. We sent this information out wrong. Can you please inform the group? I said, this was my error, my miss. I said, I misread the paperwork. And I said, this is wrong in there. And I said, but let them know we're going to resend this out and we're going to put an apology letter on it and let them know, hey, here's your correct information. And I didn't think about it because to me, it was honesty. You know, you're supposed to be honest. I was supposed to own my mistake, own my error. But my manager at the time, and I have never forgotten this, she came back and she said, Mitzi, you don't know how much that means to me, that email that you just wrote. She said, it doesn't make me trust you less, like, oh, Mitzi made a mistake. Mm-hmm. She said, it makes me trust you more. She said, because of your honesty and your integrity. Yeah. And she said, in that if you make a mistake, if something is on you, that you will own it.
That's good.
And so we don't have to be perfect. I mean, I can remember a time out of frustration, and it's not a proud moment. You know, I was working with one of our vendors, and they worked with multiple people on my team, and we just had someone who was just being awful. Mm-hmm. And you know, I made a sly remark, like nothing wrong. I didn't just sit and badger this person, but I made like a stray remark, you know, over lunch, and you know, about the situation, and I'm like, you know, it was out of sheer frustration. Mm-hmm. And it just God just dealt with my heart later, like that, you know, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
You know, that was in the audience that we've got a whole different standard. And so I texted them like as soon as I got back from lunch, and I said, listen, you know, I said, I shouldn't have made that remark. I said, it came from a place of frustration. I said, regardless of what anybody does, I said, I should have never tried to diminish them in your eyes. I said, we've just got so much going on. Yeah. And because it's causing stress for me, it wasn't a right way for me to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I said, you know, I go to church. I said, you know that I love God and I want to always please him. And I said, I don't feel like that did that, you know, and that goes to show them that's not, that was an error. That wasn't, you know, I don't want them looking back later and say, wow, Mitzi was so two-sided, you know, or you know, she says one thing and she does another. She did that, but yeah, she just talks about people. Like I wanted them to know, like that was not okay, and I'm recognizing it and I'm owning it.
Yeah, that is so good. And that reminds me of just how you live out scripture on a daily basis and reaching out people and giving that testimony. It's not always just door to door. It's in that moment like that in your office. Yeah. Hey, I made a mistake. I want to be honest about it. And you build that credibility with people. So that literally just reminded me of, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it's, is it Colossians 3? I don't remember the exact verse. It could be 23. But it's in the chapter 3 where doing things like not for men, but doing things as you're doing it for God. Yeah, yeah. How much, if we took that mentality every single day.
Thing, like that, you're doing it as unto the Lord.
As unto the Lord. Yeah. Exactly. I love that. So vulnerability is I see a lot of value in vulnerability and just being open to say, hey, you know what? I'm not perfect. Yeah. And I could speak from this, and I'm able to speak in this area because of what I've been through. And then often we pull away from that part of the conversation. Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes there is shame, and then sometimes there is that uncomfortable. But that's why I say if you become comfortable with vulnerability, then you'll be surprised how much more power and open doors you have to bringing gospel to people that have been through a similar situation. And this is why I love the story of what we call Doubting Thomas. Yeah. Because he needed to see the wounds on Jesus in order to believe. And the fact that Jesus gave him the opportunity to do that. Yeah. And then he finally got to that point. So what is Jesus actually showing us there? So like if you look at John, I want to say it's 20 verse 30. If I don't get it wrong. It tells you exactly why these things were written. And it tells you exactly that Jesus did so many other great things in front of his disciples that weren't even included in the Bible. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That they weren't written in the Bible. There were great things, but we don't need to talk about them. Like they're great. Just know that they're there.
When it gave, well, I think too, in the example that you gave, it's like he allowed Thomas to be Thomas. Yeah. Thomas needed something that somebody else didn't need, you know. And I heard a pastor, he's gone to be with the Lord now, and years ago he taught a message about the feeding of the 5,000. Okay. And that wasn't the total focus of his message, but his focus was that the Bible says that he did it because some came from afar.
Okay.
Everybody didn't come from afar.
Right.
I could have come from like that house right over there down the street or in the village. He said, but some came from afar. But because some came from afar, he fed the whole 5,000 so that those that had need or had traveled far wouldn't fall by the way. Mm-hmm. And I think God does that for us too. We see it in the life of Peter. We see it in Thomas. God did not like push Thomas away and say, we can't be my disciple anymore. Who are you? So stupid. Why can't you believe? Why do you need a sign? Like for Thomas, like there was something in Thomas that needed to touch it. Yeah. He needed to see it. He needed to know, okay, this is not a joke. You're not playing with me. Mm-hmm. Nobody had ever been raised from the dead except what they had seen in Jesus' ministry and the people that he had raised from the dead. Mm-hmm. But for a person to like they saw him and he came back. Well, they saw before Jesus was the one raising people from the dead. Yeah. And all of a sudden it made a lot more sense about, Jesus being God, the Spirit God embodied. And flesh, the oneness of God come through for him. He's like, well, if you're really Jesus, I saw you get crucified. I want to see the wounds in your hands.
Right.
So he allows us to make our mistakes because sometimes it was the boldness in Peter that allowed him to be the one that Jesus built the church on, that rock that he built the church on.
That's it.
He was a hothead. He was the one but he was also the one who said, I know who you are. He said, you're the Christ. Yeah. He had gotten that revelation. So there was good in Peter, but we might have discarded him because I don't know what he's going to say next. I can't put him in the pulpit. Who knows who he's going to offend or what he's going to say. But God showed us in just all the disciples that he used that it wasn't about wealth. He used everybody from a muddy, smelly fisherman to a doctor and a tax collector. I mean, he used the ones that people hated. His inner circle was filled with such a cross section of the world at that time. And I think that was proof in itself. Yeah. That God makes room for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. And that's why I love that scripture because the author takes time to tell you like these things were written so they could believe.
Yeah.
And when you apply that to us today, if we don't talk about those moments where we doubt, if we don't talk about those moments where we didn't get it right, then how can they really believe that this is what God did and not what we did?
Yeah.
So man, there's a lot there, and it just kind of makes me think of so many different things. We hadn't even planned on even kind of going there. But I wanted to circle back into distractions and deceptions. Because I think a lot of those can be mitigated, controlled, or at least led with more discipleship. So I've always said, and I've always taught that the enemy is not going to, his goal and his target are not to destroy you, rather than to distract you.
Yeah.
Reason being is because if you get distracted enough, you'll self-destruct.
Yes.
Or if you get distracted enough, you'll self-destruct. Therefore, he comes out, with his hands clean in essence, in a certain way, because if you get distracted enough, you're going to pull yourself out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So is that a lack of awareness or is that discipline that we're lacking?
To me, I think it can be both.
Okay.
And we talked about the lack of discipline earlier, so we know that comes into play.
Yeah.
Especially when I know, at my age and the point I am in my life, I've lived a lot of life and I still fall prey to it.
Yeah.
If I don't I can get up and I've done it, a message will come in and like for me, since moving to Houston and I totally work remote, I work from home because I still work for my company in Florida. That morning time is my precious time. That's the time I get up and I do my studying, my focus, my Bible reading. That's the time I get that done. But if I get up and there's a message there, and especially during our busy time of the year, and I'm making sure that my manager, my leadership is not making me aware, hey, Mitzi, when you get in, we got to address something. Just know, hey, look at these 2 emails when you jump on and let me know your thoughts or whatever. Yeah. And so like that time of year, I'm going to check that and just make sure, okay, what is that? But I can sit there and before I know it, I'm drinking my coffee and I've scrolled through Facebook and I've done this and I've checked email and I'm like, oh, I forgot to look at my bank statement yesterday. And I have spent all that time that, and then later I'm like, okay, I don't have time to study. I've got so much going on. Well, Mitzi, you had an hour and something this morning before you ever had to sign on to work. You had a warm cup of coffee. You had a comfy couch to sit on. You didn't even have to get dressed to do that. And you spent that time. And so, and I even talked to my group earlier about this as we've been studying distractions. And I said, sometimes we say we're too busy. I said, but we make time for what we want to do. And I said, it's like we pick and choose what we're available for. And that becomes a discipline thing and saying that, like, this is what I need to do. And if it means checking that one email for work, making sure I'm set for work, laying that down in another room and coming back to my place and saying, I'm not going to go by that, or sticking to that time that I've made for myself. And that means too, like, if I stayed up late the night before, that's my bad. I didn't go to bed on time. That's a discipline thing. Like I chose to stay up and scan or watch or read a book or do whatever I was going to do or just do whatever. And so am I going to take away from that time that I say, this is my time to study? This is the time that I can devote to this. So I think it becomes, in my estimation, sometimes I feel like it's more discipline, lack of discipline, but it can also be lack of awareness because we get caught up in it.
That's it.
Or we don't see what's happening as a distraction. And I think that's when it becomes the spiritual enemy thing where we're allowing him to unknowingly let us focus on other things. And because they are good things and they are positive things, we don't see them as like, okay, that's not good. That's a distraction. A distraction is neither, bad or good in and of itself as far as what's happening, because it's a distraction because it's keeping you from your purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And that distraction can be time spent on the wrong things, but it can also be time spent on very good things.
That's it.
But it's just not where you should be spending your time.
Yeah. And I love this because I feel like it's like a domino effect. Everything that we've been talking about is like one thing will affect the next thing and affect the next thing. And I feel that it's very frustrating trying to sit and mentor someone or trying to sit and discuss someone. You're trying to help them. And the goal is like trying to say, hey, look, you need to wake up. Like, this is where your focus is and this is where it needs to be. Yeah. So how can we help people, or how would you say approach someone or a situation like that? You're stuck in this denial and I'm trying to disrupt you out of it so you can actually accomplish something, attain something, and actually put you on the path that we feel that God is leading you to. Yeah.
And one thing I have found with that is, for one, people have to be open to it. Yeah. And I have found many times, as I'm sure you have, working with young people, working with young adults, that they don't want to see it, or they've kind of fooled themselves into a comfort zone of sorts of like, well, what does Mitzi know what she's talking about? What does Jay know what he's talking about? I'm okay doing this. I'm coming to church. I'm not missing church, but is missing, like, being attendance to church cannot be equated to a strong relationship with God.
Right.
That, just showing up doesn't mean I'm where I need to be with the Lord. Yep. Because I participated in worship today doesn't mean I'm where I need to be with God.
Fast food.
Yeah.
We can't live off fast food.
And so there's got to be that recognition and them willing to say somebody else knows something that I don't know. And it can be a stubbornness, it can be a pride thing. And it's like, is it more important to be right, or do you want to be okay? Do I have to be right? Do I have to prove to Jay that I can keep doing this?
Yeah.
And I'm okay right where I'm at? Or is it more important to me to say, maybe Jay's right? Like, I'm really not where I should be. I'm not getting where I should be. He knows that I know it, but I'm not willing to admit it. And what I try to do in those situations where somebody's not open, to listening, and usually what I try to do, number one, is just engage in conversation. And I have found that our young adults of this age struggle with that because they avoid a phone conversation. I think we all kind of got into that mode where it's like, oh, just text me, don't call me, don't make me talk to you, send me a text. But they miss that value of sitting face to face with someone and just having a conversation about life.
Yeah.
And really and you talked about vulnerability earlier, how important that is. Well, the person that needs to learn, that needs to grow, they've got to be willing to have that vulnerability too. And listen to some things and hear some things about themselves they don't want to hear. And they're not always pleasant to hear, is that, that this is an area that I need to change. And so, I try to do one-on-one in that and just say, hey, where do you want to be? Do you feel like this course of action is getting you there? It's almost like they need to see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's helping create that visual in their mind about, okay, like, if you do this, but what if you keep doing it your way?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the difference in the outcome there? To be willing to listen to other input, into their life. And sometimes if they don't make it available, I still try, like, in indirect ways. If I know somebody's struggling with something in particular, to, maybe give it a place in a lesson that we're working on and reach out to them. Sometimes I know they're listening, but I'm actually talking to somebody else about the same thing I know they're struggling with.
Right.
And even though sometimes they put up that face of like, I'm not listening, I don't need your help, I've got this. They don't want to admit it, so pride's there, but they're listening.
They're listening.
Yeah,
they are.
And so I like to tell people who are working with any age group, keep talking. With Jen and Jacob, we call it pouring. I call it pouring with them.
Love that.
And I said, you're going to have people that it's going to look like they're going nowhere. They don't want anything to do with us. They're not opening. They're not willing to be involved in the ministry. When they're here, they almost distract everybody else because they're just like, doing their own thing and really pulling away from the unity we're trying to make happen.
Right.
I said, but our job is not to change people. I said, we can't do that. I said, we are pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring in the hopes that our pouring later on, they're like, you know what? I was really kind of like a little bit of a jerk and a little bit, ugly. But Sister Mitzi just kept hugging me. She kept showing up. She kept telling me that she loved me. She kept telling me she was proud of me. I've told young people, I'm proud of you. Not because maybe they've passed some big milestone or whatever, but they're just showing up. Even when they don't look engaged, they're showing up. I'm proud of you. You came today. You opened yourself up to hear something.
Yeah.
You made yourself available to be in the house of God and to just pour and pour and pour. Even like, we can't base what we do on their reaction.
That's it.
Or we would often quit. Because if they're not open to it, we still have to say, my job is not to gauge, who's full, who's getting it, who doesn't get it.
It's too discouraging.
Yeah, it's too discouraging.
Yeah.
I found a quote recently, and I loved it. It said that living by faith is not trusting God for big things to happen.
Okay.
It's walking by faith is when you continue to show up again and again and do the work even when you don't see momentum. It's like being faithful in the dry season, being faithful when you're not seeing any harvest come out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's so
because
good.
sometimes you can work 2, 3, 4 years in a ministry and I feel like I am pouring my heart and soul in this, and I've got one person that I feel like is responding, or I've got a couple of people. It's like you live through them. You don't know who you're talking to there. You know, you may be talking to the person that one day is gonna they're so happy that you're willing to focus on them, and they're soaking it up like a sponge, and one day they may blow your mind with the stuff they do, and you had a part in that. But you didn't see that at the time. That wasn't revealed to you then. They weren't at their peak or their prime, or maybe even what you realized. You don't even realize where they were at that moment in their life. But you pour and you pour
Absolutely.
and you pour.
You keep pouring. I remember as you were saying that, I remember a specific testimony that somebody brought to me. I was still in my first 5 years maybe of youth pastoring, and this was already 12, 13 years ago. Like, it's been a while. And we had a young man that came in to our youth night, and I knew that he was involved in a lot of different things. He was involved in gangs. He was involved in drugs. At that point, he had already experienced juvenile detention and borderline already imprisonment in county and things like that. So he came in very, very serious, but somehow, I don't know, I say it's the Holy Spirit that gave me discernment to just kind of feel him, and to kind of like, this is what you're trying to portray, but this is not really who you are.
Yeah.
Because every time I saw him, that's what I would feel. This is what you're trying to make people think you are. You know, that you're this person, you're hard, you're intimidating, and I didn't believe that. That was not something that I planned that way, or that I put too much thought into. It's just something that now looking back, I understand it. I didn't understand it then. So I say that because the way that I reacted, and I found this out later when he told me. In the moment, the only thing that I would ever do, I would treat him like everybody else. It didn't matter to me what he looked like. It didn't matter to me his I didn't judge him for his experiences or for what he was struggling with. So every time that I came up to him, I would hug on him. I would ask him about his day. I would come and talk to him, interest myself in his life. And I've always been a person that I'm never going to give unsolicited advice. If somebody doesn't ask me a specific question, unless I'm mentoring a person and it's an understood conversation, then that's different. But I'm never going to give unsolicited advice. So I wasn't going to just step into this young man's life and say, hey, you know, you need to do this rather than this. That person already knew he was outside of God's will. I didn't have to go and emphasize that or make him feel judged or make him feel worse for his lifestyle. So I just felt in the moment, I felt driven by the Spirit to just love on him, hug on him, talk to him, being interested in his life. So fast forward years later, he continues the drug path, continues the addiction path, the juvie path. He did some time in I believe it was county. I don't remember, but he was incarcerated for a short amount of time. Later, we reconnect again. He's a completely different person.
Yeah.
He's a completely different person. And years later, he comes back to me and he says, do you know why I kept coming to those youth nights? Do you know why I would let you talk to me? I could have walked away. He goes, because you kept loving on me.
Yeah.
Every time I saw you, that you would just come and hug me. And he goes, you made me feel loved and accepted.
Yeah.
And
you gave him the one thing he was desperate for.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then that just completely marked me. And I didn't know in the moment then, but now looking in hindsight, how important, how essential is just simply loving on people.
Oh, yeah.
And not judging them for what they look like. And it's so easy for, I'm going to just flat out say it, apostolics, Pentecostals, seeing someone that doesn't look like you.
Yeah. They struggle with it.
say, well, I'm going to sit over here.
Yeah.
Like, no, like that's not part of the commission.
No.
That's not discipleship. That's not mentoring. You grew up in this, so you know about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the ones that did. But what about the ones that just came in and the only thing they know is the first 20, 25 years of their life is a specific lifestyle.
Yeah. It's
They
all
didn't grow
know.
up in it.
No, it's all they know.
love is still essential key to mentoring and discipleship, I believe.
Oh yeah. You can't go anywhere without it. And at the end of the day, it's like we are called to win. And there's a verse in Proverbs that says that he that winneth souls is wise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can take that scripture a lot of different ways and say, oh, it's wise to win souls. But I've always loved to look at that scripture as that to win a soul, I have to use wisdom.
Yeah.
And I have to love them where they are and not and when you do that, whether people embrace what you've told them or not,
Yeah.
you are giving them a true and pure form of Christianity.
That's it.
That they can never deny, that they
Right.
can't walk away from.
Right.
Because it's like, regardless of whether, Mitzi knew I live a homosexual lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
or I've embraced this or I've embraced that, she loved me. She treated me with respect, and these people are God's creation, and they're not always, people are going to come in with baggage and hurt and having survived things that we could never even dream of going through. And if they can't find love and healing in the house of God, where else are they going to find it?
Right.
And
That's why they're there.
It's like we want them to have, an encounter with the love of God,
Yeah.
not feel judged. It's like if we live the life that we're supposed to and live what's right, that in and of itself will convict people. You don't have to tell somebody you're not doing this or you should be doing this. It's like I want them to fall in love with who I've committed my life to. I want them to fall in love with God,
Right.
because they see something in me that is so noble, that is so pure, that they're like, I want that.
Yeah.
I want whatever she has. I don't agree with her the amount that she pulls back or how she separates from certain things. I don't agree that maybe this is wrong or that's wrong. But this is real. People can't deny that when you live under the authority of the Spirit of God and you allow that to dictate and how you treat and how you deal with others. Yeah. And we can't do it any other way. We have to love people. I've seen backsliders struggle to come in and we don't know what they've been exposed to, and they come back into the church and they're trying to figure out, and we're like, oh, they know the truth. They need to get back. They need to get themselves together. We just expect everything to snap back. Oh, they go to the altar, they pray, everything's good. No, when people have had an experience with God and they walk away and they realize that it's hard enough to come back without feeling like you're being sized up by everybody.
Yeah.
That I don't have a place of safety to go to. Like church is home. Church should be a safe place.
Exactly. A safe place. It should be.
Yeah.
It should be. And it's unfortunate at times that sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. We're supposed to be out fishing and we're pushing them away.
Yeah.
Instead of catching them, we're sending them back home empty.
Yeah.
And that's why I love equipping. I love discipleship. I love conversations like these, because you have no idea how much this already up to this point has blessed me so much and has taught me so much already. And I know that it's going to do that for other people as well. And I hope that somebody does get that value from it and can cherish that. So I believe that we won't look in any other case. We won't look more like Jesus than when we're sitting and loving the people that the world doesn't want.
Exactly.
With the broken, and we're all sinful, and at the same time, the people that have struggled in life, the people that have that have backstories, the people that have experienced abuse, and the people that have been mistreated. It's like, if we're supposed to be God's image, if we're supposed to be God's image and representing and living out the word and the truth that we claim to believe, then we need to look like Jesus in the sense of doing the things that Jesus did.
Yeah.
Sitting with the sinful,
Sitting at meat with sinners.
sinners. Yeah.
Dealing with what they considered like well, we don't mix with them. We
Right.
don't do that.
Right.
Like he turned everything upside down. I mean,
Exactly.
we just had a lesson this past Thursday night. My sister-in-law taught, on servant leadership.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like, Jesus didn't wash the disciples' feet as here's a good example of something you could do or should do. No, he was showing them, this is who I am. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be like me, this is what we do. This is what leadership, this is what serving looks like. The greatest will be the least will be the greatest. There's no, and we've got to do that with one another. And we most definitely have to do that with those that we're winning, that we're trying to win, that we're trying to share the gospel with. It's that loving and serving, and that willingness to go out of our way and, for the needs of somebody else.
Absolutely. And that is a struggle in itself, because automatically we want to think of self. Mm-hmm. Automatically we want to put ourselves first, put ourselves in that position. But we'll look more like Jesus when we put others first.
Yeah.
And representing that image of God, that image of Christ is never been more prevalent than whenever we do that. Sit with the sinners and actually be interested in what they have to say, and you'll be surprised how much more of discipleship you can learn from taking the time and being open to those questions. So that kind of leads me to this: how can we encourage others to speak up and guide those who are seeking and asking questions? And the reason why I phrase it that way and I ask that is because sometimes we shy away. Yeah. Well, they don't want to hear from me. Mm-hmm. My story is not relevant to them. What am I going to say? Yeah. And you'll be surprised on how we can actually be encouraging others to speak up. Yeah. Be present in their life. Yeah. Listen to those questions. Look for the body language. Look for the tone. Where can you present Jesus and the gospel? And seeking those questions and seeing where the voids are is essential.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is that there's that intimidation. Yeah. And what do I have to offer? And I guess this could go either way. Like, I don't know if your intent was like in the mentoring process, or when we're dealing with those that are churched, or when we're dealing with the lost. Mm-hmm. You don't know which way you're wanting to go with it. But I think either way, I think it comes down to the human experience. Mm-hmm. And when you, like, anybody can get down and teach a devotional on the gospel. Mm-hmm. Or like, here's a scripture I read and here are my thoughts on this. Here's what but when you can relay something to someone, that's where we get connected. It's not on thoughts, not on what book you've read or what book I've read, mm-hmm. or whatever, but it is on our human experience. Right. What have I gone through? Yeah. What is my background? What was my family life like growing up? Mm-hmm. What did I deal with? And we never know like what someone's story is or what they're struggling with. And that I think we all have something to give. Mm-hmm. And we have to realize that God called us to love and to serve one another. And when I reach out to you and I'm like, hey, keep doing what you're doing, Jay. I just want, I want to share something with you, mm-hmm. That this happened when I was younger and it has an impact on me and I struggled with it. And I just want you to know that I just feel like you're going to do great in this area or whatever you're doing. Like, I think we're all called to pull one another. Right. We just started something in the LT and TDV with our Jules ministry that kind of came up, started up a couple of years ago, and they're doing what they're calling My Sister's Keeper, and realizing that everybody needs that hand up. Everybody needs that word of encouragement. Yes. That it's not always a big thing. Sometimes it's a small thing that says, wow, you're really growing in what you're doing, that you're doing great at this. Mm-hmm. Or if you see a gap there, like helping them grow in that, you
Right.
know, and realizing that you do have something to share. You don't have to be a Bible scholar
That's it.
to even encourage somebody who's in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes they just like sometimes the ministry, those that are teaching and preaching to us every week and pouring into us, they just need to realize, hey, that is making a difference.
Yeah.
You know, like that helped me, that touched me.
Yeah, dude.
You know, I taught a lesson at one of our midweek devotions a couple of weeks ago, and someone that, you know, I didn't know that was a particular struggle for them or an area of their life that they were really focusing on. And they remarked to me, they're like, okay, well, that one hit me, Sister Mitzi. Like, I really needed that in my life. And so what does that do to me? That encourages me.
Absolutely.
And says, okay, don't back down. Even if you feel like, well, does everybody need this? Am I teaching the right thing for my group right now? You know, do we have the right focus? If it's from the word and it's valuable for life, pour it, love them. And it encourages me. Like they don't have to know something that I don't know to help me or to help me grow in my life.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's that life experience that people learn from that we share with. That's what we end up relating to.
That's
You know,
it. Right
shared
there. That's the connection.
shared loss, shared happiness, all of those things that are the human experience. You know, because we've talked about it before, like when you teach, sometimes you feel like, okay, I'm losing my group. Oh, they're like, you start making it personal.
That's it. That's
You
the
know
secret
where
right
I
there.
struggled with this? You know what happened when I was a teenager? You know what happened to me one time? All of a sudden, everybody that had their mind somewhere else or wasn't following you as you're reading the scriptures, they're like, hold on, what happened to you? We love a story.
Yeah.
Humans love a good story.
Yeah, we do.
We love a good storyline. We want to know, well, who are you? Wait, I didn't know you struggled with that. I didn't know you ever had a time in your life where you were at that place in your life. I thought you were like, no, you know, and so I think we can't be, we can't step back from what we bring to the table.
Right.
Because really, if we do that, we're saying, okay, God, you made a mistake with me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have anything to offer. What I have is not good enough. God's saying, no, you know, you were made for this. You've got somebody in your realm that you're going to win. You've got a gifting that you are going to excel in, you know, because that's my will for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't want to tell God, okay, God, you made a mistake. Who am I? I don't have anything to offer. No, we all do.
Yeah. So not allowing our gifts to develop and not stepping into those difficult conversations or that vulnerability, then sometimes it allows or it portrays it communicates a message saying that God got it wrong with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was having an awesome conversation with Brother Ron Smith when he was on the podcast. We were recording together, and he's amazing. We had such a good conversation, and we talked a lot about communication. And as you were saying that, it made me think, every time you open the Bible, the Red Sea is going to part every single time you read it.
Yeah.
You read about the people of Israel going through the desert, the same amount of time, the time doesn't change. They didn't spend a day more, a day less every time you read it. It's the same story.
Yeah.
Jesus is going to resurrect from the from the tomb on the third day every single time you read it.
Yeah.
And Thomas is going to doubt every single time you read it. So what I'm trying to say is that every time that we share a message, we can talk about these great things. It's the Bible. It's the Word of God. It's living. Absolutely. We give it its credit. But how does it become real to the person?
Yes.
And being able to communicate that clearly is going to hinge on our transparency and our vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then that's exactly what you're just saying. It becomes real to the person. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know that you struggled with that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had that experience. So I've always told people, and I've always applied this to my life, my personal life, that Jesus, I have a personal relationship with Jesus, and communicating that to people and encouraging people to have their own relationship with God in itself and their own. Now, we read the same Bible, read the same scripture, but that's going to apply to me differently. Like God's going to mold me, speak to me in a different way. But there's in the same way, there's people that relate to your story in a very intimate way, because they're not going to tell anybody about it. So whenever we communicate in front of people, we share a message. Oftentimes, actually, every time that we do it, it's actually taking a step of faith.
Yes,
We're taking a step of faith, and we believe that God is the one that put it in our heart, that put it in us to give to the people. And then at the same time, we don't know for a fact that that's the word that they need. So it's a step of faith. And then whenever you do get that kind of feedback, that's the biggest encouragement. Like in my preference, I would much rather hear, you know what? Thank you for that word. Like that blessed me because that's what I'm going through, rather than you did a great job.
Yes.
And I don't want that to come off a certain way.
It was relevant for me.
It was relevant.
Yeah, like it touched in something where I needed a change in my life.
Yes.
Because it's different. Like you said, it's different than my execution was good.
Right,
like,
right.
you brought out all the points just at the right time.
Yeah.
But it's different when they say, you just taught me how to conquer something I'm working on.
Yeah.
You know, how to deal with that. And I think that is the most critical thing about the Word of God is you can read through it. And like you said, those stories do not change.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I can read them a million times. I can do my Bible read throughs. But at what point, when do I learn to apply it to my life?
Yeah.
That is where true change happens. That's where I can go to the next level with it. It's because I've learned how to take what happened in that story in the desert when they were walking around. Why were they walking around? Because they missed something. They missed something. They got it wrong. Well, how do I apply that into my life? What am I missing? What am I getting wrong? You know, and that's where I think the knowledge base and having wisdom and being willing to discipline ourselves to grow in God, to grow in grace, to rightly divide the word, to just pour ourselves to be students of the word. That's where we see it take root and begin to grow in our life, when we can apply it to life circumstances and pour it into others.
Absolutely. And I love that. And that's why I love our conversation, because I think in mentoring and discipleship, I think that's where people grow the most. And you can get the sound bites, you can get the sound clips on social media, and that's good. You know, it's a quick little nuggets, you know, that encourage you or give you good reminders, but you can't live off of fast food.
No.
Like we were discussing earlier. You can't live off of just one-off Sundays and hearing a percentage of the message. Like you mentioned, coming in and listening to something, we don't capture the 100% of it because we get distracted. We wander off and we think about other things, and we don't get the full download.
Yeah.
And being able to do it on our own in mentoring, discipleship, conversations like these, round tables, small communities, small groups, midweek small groups, things like that. Those are so essential. And Sister Mitzi, I feel like this has really truly blessed my life.
Same. I always enjoy our conversations, always.
And I had no idea I was going to go to a lot of the areas that we touched on, but I just felt like it was led by the Spirit. And I'm just so grateful for your life. I'm grateful for your ministry. I'm grateful for your servant heart and your willingness to continually sacrifice yourself for others, not only just young people, but just ministry in general. And I know there's great things coming for LT, Life Tabernacle, even the Spanish ministry, Tabernáculo de Vida.
Yeah.
And I love your church, your pastors, Pastor Hopkins, Pastor Monday, phenomenal leaders, phenomenal preachers, phenomenal families and men of God. And I can go on. And they've been, your family, you know, without even knowing, has been pivotal for my life. There's a very tight knit relationship back in the earlier days of their time. My grandmother and Sister Hopkins' mother.
Aww.
She was my grandmother's mentor. I don't know if you knew that.
I don't know if
Sister
we
Rodriguez.
had shared that before. I think it seemed like last time we had talked, you had mentioned that, and I had forgotten about it though.
Yeah. So I feel like we just connected to your family like a long time ago, and it's been tremendous, and I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this, and I want to thank you so much for taking time to bring in so much value, and not only just giving your time, but so much value into this conversation. And I know that it's going to bless so many people, and I hope that they share it and they grow from this conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's always an honor, always a pleasure. And, like we've talked about, we don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I feel like when there's that desire to grow ourselves and to grow and pour into others, that when we meet like this, it's like later on this conversation, I'm going to take a nugget away from it, a word you said or something that we talked about, because I'm thinking of it one way and then you take it a whole different direction, because that's what happens when we talk and when we share together the principles of the Word of God. It's like it shoves them deeper. We each make each other. It's like iron sharpeneth iron.
I'm sharpened today.
We think about stuff. Yes, same.
You made me sharper.
We think about stuff that, we like, well, I didn't think about it in that context, and it makes us more aware as we go forward and we serve and we minister to others. So, I love the ministry that you're doing, and I know it's blessing, young people's lives. And, I'm working with two that are both family, and that, you guys mentor and work with too. Same as I am, and you're mentoring them in other areas in ways that I can't, and I'm working with them from another direction, and I hope it just
that was unplanned, by the way. It just kind of happened
for them,
Yeah, that just kind of happened organically on its own, and I think it's mutual. The value is mutual with them. So my wife and I have always had roundtable conversations with different people going back years, and that was unplanned. It's just we took an opportunity to where somebody said, "Hey, I need to talk to you." Then come over, let's have a cup of coffee, and then we'll go from there. We're never trying to make it fancy. Let's go to Starbucks. Let's go to a bowling alley. Let's do this.
Yeah,
and that's fine in every context. But there's something just special, and then just setting establishing a setting where someone can be safe and vulnerable and say, "Look, I'm bleeding. I need help."
Yeah, and be face to face. And some of the most precious conversations I've had through the years have been just in those type of settings where they feel, okay, this is my safe place, and they feel that that liberty to draw from you and to really pour their heart out where they can get the help that they need. And I'm hoping that I can just keep pulling that, because I don't want to make this generation something that they're not. But I also I don't want them to lose the core values that you don't need to lose from that. You don't need to trash everything your parents did.
Right.
Everything is not, no, we add to that foundation.
Absolutely.
We add to what other people put blood, sweat, and tears into, and we take all the good and all the value that we became what we are because of that foundation.
Yeah, the building blocks.
And so I don't want them to lose the value of conversations like this, where we sit down together, and it's not a quick thing. It's not something done on the fly. No, we sit down and we're very honest about where we are in life, and we learn from one another.
I think that sets a stage for next time you come back. We're going to talk about deconstructions.
Oh.
Today we talked about distractions and deceptions and mentoring, and follow on that path. And I think we're going to go on deconstructing and reconstructing on the truth. Maybe.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Part 2.
There you go, part 2. I'm looking forward to it.
So I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in and staying in the conversation this long. Bring your notepad, share it with somebody. Think of someone else when you hear these things, and you can help somebody else and share it with them. And there's huge value in that. And before we go, I want you to remember this, that you are called, you are seen, and you are loved. And that's the truth.
Yes.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of our conversation today. In the description below, you will find links where you can connect with our guest today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, you can go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. Also, if you would like to contribute in helping us reach others, I invite you to do so simply by leaving a good rating, leave a review, or even share it on your social media. And that would mean so much to me. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. In the description below, you will also find links where we can connect. You can let me know how this was helpful to you. You can visit my blog page where you can find more helpful content like this at inspired2, inspired.org. Inspired2, inspired.org. For now, continue moving forward in the direction God is leading you. You can continue moving closer and becoming what God has called you to be so you can be impactful in every area of your life. God bless, and we'll see you on the next one.